Take time to reflect. I think most people acknowledge the value in reflecting on your own experience, but in my experience, people do it so infrequently. Think about it, as you reflect, it improves your self-awareness. Now that is definitely a good thing, and specifically, self-awareness helps you build your resilience. When you come to notice your strengths, perhaps, you reflect on your competencies. So the reason I think it's even more important now than ever is if you're going through a lot of challenge, a lot of stress, and if your workload is sustained, the risk is, as you become tired or you feel a lack of energy, what can often happen is that can skew the way you think. Now, human beings have a quite healthy negative bias. Healthy in the sense that it can help us stay alive, right? From an evolutionary perspective, it's important to be hyper vigilant, to be particularly aware of the potential threats and therefore potential negative content. But you see, there is a risk here, isn't there? If we're not careful, as we reflect on our typical day, as we get to the end of a busy day, it's all too easy, isn't it, to only really consider the stuff we could have done better, the things that maybe went wrong, the things perhaps that weren't necessarily positive. So this video, I want to really hammer home the importance of not just reflection on a kind of philosophical level, but actually encourage you now to become more reflective as a practice. Well, let's turn it straight away into an exercise, right? Get a pen and paper if you haven't already got one. And in a moment, I'm going to ask you to pause this video and get reflective. And I want you to think about the last week, right? The last week of your life, whether it's at work or otherwise. And I want you to just think and consider what has gone well, right? What has been the good stuff? And I want you specifically to identify things that you have done well. You might want to think in terms of the impact, the positive impact you've had on other people. You might want to think about the progress you've made in one way or another. You might want to think about your learnings, the sense of achievement that you might have had, right? So there's lots of things I'm asking you to kind of extract, but I'm asking you to focus on the positive. Cast your mind back over the last 7 days. What's gone well? Okay, so hopefully just by doing that simple, brief exercise, you started to notice perhaps some positive benefits. By reflecting on the good stuff, it tends to improve your well-being. Certainly if the alternative is instead to reflect on the bad stuff. But also, as we get better at noticing, reflecting and pausing on the things that we've done well, right? Things that we may have delivered well, people we may have helped, then that also tends to build our sense of confidence through our understanding of our own competence, and ultimately we have a greater sense of self-efficacy. This is important, not just for your well-being, but also again for your resilience, because the more you understand about your own competencies, the more likely you are to be able to thrive under higher levels of pressure. Make sense? But also hopefully you realized as you bothered to spend a few moments reflecting how much good stuff there is to notice if you give it the time. Now, it doesn't need to take much time, but it does need to take at least some intention. Now, the other thing that reliably happens as we reflect on not just what we've done, but our sense of achievement, growth, learning, skill development, even small things, that also affects our emotional relationship with what we're doing. In particular, as you make this a practice, right, noticing things you're getting better at, it also tends to improve your sense of motivation, your sense of engagement, right? Your emotional engagement with work, with life, and that tends to also improve your well-being and your sense of energy. You put all this stuff together, the simple act of reflecting not only improves your self-awareness, but is more likely to help you sustain your well-being and your performance over time. So now, how can I help you turn this into a habit? Well, you may already have some ideas, but I would encourage you to think about how can you turn this into your daily routines? To what degree could you spend a couple of moments, maybe 2 minutes, at the end of your average day, right? Maybe as you finish your shift, You spend a couple of minutes reflecting on the things that have gone well, the things you've learned, how you've helped others, right? Maybe it's when you get home instead. Remember, if you've seen the video on how to switch off, there is a real importance in having a deadline, but also managing your transition from work brain to switch off brain. What a glorious thing to include in that transition, right? Just a moment, a minute or two, reflecting again on what's gone well today. How about your typical week? Maybe you're thinking more in terms of an average sort of 7-day habit, where at the end of a typical week, you could pick a repeating day. Again, you don't need to spend more than a few minutes. Just write all these things down. You see what I'm getting at? What I'm encouraging you to do is not just to do this thing once and hopefully to gain some insights, but to become someone that turns this into a practice. Someone that becomes more reflective, right? This kind of philosophical truism that the examined life is better than the unexamined one, because not only does it help you become more self-aware, it also puts you in a better position to make subtle changes to improve your future based on your past. And that's maybe one last invitation I'd like to give you. I would strongly urge you to, along with your daily and weekly practice, to, starting today, do a quarterly review. Question number 1, looking back over the last 3 months, what's gone well? You should be familiar with that question already. Start with the good stuff. Question 2, looking back over the same time frame, what's been harder than you anticipated? See the value in this? What have the challenges been? What have the frustrations been? What's been difficult? See, it's important to reflect on that with some regularity. Question 3, back to learning. What else have you learnt? You see, when you reflect back over a bigger time frame, other stuff is likely to come up. What have you learnt about yourself, perhaps? Question 4, what's missing? A deliberately ambiguous question here, quite a coachy question. What's missing? Another way to think about this is, okay, those 3 questions you've done already, all right, well, what else is important to you that hasn't yet come up? Often this is when I realize, okay, well, I'm not spending enough time with my friends perhaps, or maybe in the past I reflected what's missing. I'm not writing as much music as I might like. This 4th question really helps you get a sense or an analysis of your sense of balance, right? What's missing? And then question 5, in this 5-question review, what do you now want to change going forward? Right? Based on your answers to the first 4 questions and the insights that it's prompted, what are you now going to do about this in terms of your new behaviors for the next 3 months? What could you start or do more of? What do you want to stop or do less of? You see how reflection doesn't just make you more self-aware, more confident, greater sense of self-efficacy, a greater likelihood of kind of managing your negative bias and deliberately influencing the content of your thinking. But over time, as you make it broader, you're more likely to kind of coach yourself into ultimately an ever better situation, so that ultimately over time you not only build your resilience and your well-being, but you start to live a life that's more accordance with your values, with what's important to you.